Well, welcome to Increase the Mission 2023. We're so excited at Help One Child to have you join us tonight as we just take a look and celebrate the impact Help One Child is having around the Bay Area. We're especially excited to celebrate our 30th birthday. In 1993, Mark and Joanne Morris founded Help One Child as they realized there was this great need for foster parents, and that foster parents desperately needed support and people wrapping around them. Before we get in too far, I actually just want to hear from the Morrises as they recall kind of the legacy of Help One Child, how it got started, and what they hope for our future. So let's hear from them.
I think God heard the cries from these children and from these families. Somehow God involved us in that by our getting involved with foster care through adoption.
We were interested in adopting. We had one little girl of our own who was 3 years old and very precocious, and she wanted a sister. And the county said, no, you are too old to adopt. Earlier on, we decided to become foster parents if we couldn't adopt. So we got a delightful little girl who came to us with her 15-year-old mother. One day, she said, you have the kind of family I always wished that I had. Would you adopt Alicia? We were delighted to adopt her, and our 3-year-old was delighted to have her for a sister. We had another foster child that was just a little bit younger than our youngest one. It was very difficult, and that little girl did go home to live with her mother. And I told Mark, the work that we've been doing with these two children is the most important work we'll probably ever do with our lives, but I can't do it anymore. I'm just worn out. And I really was, because there was no respite care. The only way you could go anywhere was if you could find another foster parent who was licensed to babysit for you. So it was really 24/7. You were just constantly bombarded with a child that's hurting and needs help. I kept thinking, what could I do that could help foster children? We went out to talk to pastors about what we were going to do. We were just asking them for 5 minutes time behind the pulpit so that we could stand up and just say, are there any of you here who feel like God might be calling you to a ministry like this? And if you don't think you could do it, could you possibly help support a foster parent who could do it? We found 10 volunteers and 1 foster parent. It's very discouraging. And we started out with the respite care. And even though it started very slowly, it began to roll. And in the second and third year, we began to have some real families doing some real work.
The concept we had was, let's show these children Christ's love. And so the families we were recruiting were Christian families. We're doing it because they cared about children. The difference between our foster parents and the regular county foster parents was kind of like raising the standard for the county. And they told us that our foster families lasted 4 times longer than the normal ones. It was just showing them love, and it's in the Bible, take care of the widows and orphans.
One of the things that we learned was that we didn't know enough about what trauma does to a child and why the behaviors that we were witnessing in our homes were the way they were. We started having wonderful parenting classes. All foster parents were invited, and they were invited to be part of our support groups. Once they committed to taking in a foster child, we wanted to see it to the end so that the child didn't have additional trauma from moving. We also said, if the child's not able to go back to the biological family, we hope that you will consider adoption.
Our goal is to live Christ around them, and maybe they'll see a better way in their life. It's not easy, but Christ didn't ask you to just walk the easy road. That's where the future is just walk the walk and talk the talk. I don't know how else to face the future. Our ministry is called Help One Child. We were not trying to solve the government's problem, but we can solve one child maybe. We're not giving up on these children, so The durability of Help One Child is in God's hands. Never give up. Never give up. So maybe that's what we should encourage for Help One Child. Never give up. Never give up.
Grounding, right? To take a moment and hear from the founders and be reminded from Mark, never give up. Those are some important and heavy words to hear, but that's what we hope at Help One Child. We hope that the programs that we run provide the strength for these families to never give up, to continue to provide a safe space for these kids where they can feel loved and cared for, whether that's a biological family, an adoptive or foster family, kinship family, whoever they are, we want to see families strengthened. Well, as we reflect on 30 years, I think one of the important things to recognize is how difficult it can be to define success when you're talking about foster care. I mean, really think about it. Is success a child entering foster care and there being an immediate home or placement for that child? Or is success a child not entering foster care at all? Is success a child entering foster care but then reunifying or being adopted? I mean, there's just so many different avenues and different things impacting each child's story and journey that it's really hard to say this is what defines success. Right? The number of kids touched by the foster care system then going on to graduate high school or college, or you fill in the blank. At Help One Child, we have the privilege of really seeing over 30 years where the impact can be made. And just like Mark said, we believe it to be in the ongoing yes, the never giving up. And so we want to enable families through our programs, right, that are built around strengthening them, supporting them, that they would find community, education, resources when needed, that they would continue to say yes to the children in their care. But then also we want to see the church be provided opportunities to say yes. And so I want to take a minute and just recognize a couple of programs. One of our, I think, largest impact when you're talking about significance, our parent support groups were launched in 1999, and today we have 10 different locations running around the Bay Area, which is absolutely incredible. We're so grateful for those early years. We had Linda Ikeda and Dr. John Williams walking with us and walking, most importantly, with our families as they tried to navigate understanding the kids that were in their care. But what we know is that years later, even still, these families that find community with one another amongst peers, that can learn from one another and be boosted up and encouraged by one another. It's so impactful. We hear it time and time again. We're thankful again for the growth of that program and would love to see that continue as we reach into new regions. From there, we launched an education program. You know, there's been a lot of work to better understand how the brain develops, period, but also how things like trauma impact its development. And really, you can see the evidence of that in health and also in behavior and how kids are functioning and kind of living out their trauma on a day-to-day basis. To date, we have hosted over 130 parent education trainings and seminars, and 2 of them most recently in brand new regions in San Francisco and also in Santa Rosa. And we're so thankful for the staff, the volunteers, and the churches that made that happen so that families new to our network could be served and strengthened. There's 2 more programs I want you to hear about. The first is Giving Tree. Over 27,000 gifts have been raised through our Giving Tree program since its birth. It's an incredible number. Most of those years, it was only in Santa Clara and San Mateo County. And there's probably something you don't recognize. Well, 27,000 gifts is incredible, but you may not also associate that with 27,000 yeses. You know, a lot of people think that if they can't be foster parents, there's nothing within foster care that they can do to make an impact. And that's part of what we hope to overcome, right? We want to provide those yeses because we want this to be something the whole community engages in. And so 27,000 gifts meant 27,000 yeses, right? People stepping forward and providing a gift to a child in need. Another just kind of incredible tidbit to that, we provided a survey to all the churches that responded last year, or participated rather, in our Giving Tree program. And we asked the question, how many other times throughout the year do you talk about foster care as a congregation, especially from the pulpit? And by and large, the answer was none. And so all the more, Giving Tree provides an opportunity for churches to raise up the concerns around foster care and normalize what this very, unnormal experience can be like. The last program I want to talk about is just Care Portal. And if you haven't heard about Care Portal, I encourage you to just take a look at our website, and it's a fantastic platform that lets the community respond to real-time vetted needs. And so since its launch here in the Bay Area of October 2019, we've seen we've actually just hit 1,500 kids have been served through the Care Portal platform, which is absolutely incredible. 1,500 kids in just over 2 years. The other thing, similar to the yes for giving gifts, is we have 1,000 church responders signed up to receive emails notifying them of these needs and requests that come through for Care Portal. 1,000 individuals that really Help One Child had no touch point with prior to Care Portal being launched. So it's just an incredible thing, and that we just see that program growing exponentially every year. And so we hope that you'll look into it and see where you can fit. Well, as I mentioned, success can be hard to define, but I think that we all can agree that families being strengthened and empowered to continue to say yes is a great definition of success. I want to take a minute and have you hear from one of our families. Jay and Pam have been in the network of Help One Child for over 20 years, and no longer do they find themselves necessarily in the trenches with kids in their home, but they continue to show up and give back in meaningful ways, and we're so thankful for them. Here they are.
I think for me, foster care is about doing the hard thing. God's called me to this. It could be really challenging, but I know God will be with me in that. I think God calls us to be uncomfortable, and I think that's when we end up drawing closer to Him in our discomfort.
Pam started a ministry called New Creation Home, which was a home for teen moms. One of the kids that was living there, it happened that his mom approached us and said she wanted to place him somewhere, and this child that we had prayed over for so long, we just looked at each other and said, well, I think this is supposed to be us. I was reluctant initially. It was a big unknown thing. I didn't know what it involved. I didn't know what kind of risks we'd be taking on.
I think our original thought was that we would foster young kids and adopt them if they became adoptable. Our first foster placement was a 5-year-old, and then we took a teenager, and from then on in, we got teenagers. So we fostered 11 teenagers and a 5-year-old. I was actually adopted when I was 4.5 months old. I was in foster care before then. My foster mother was a really good one, so I wanted to hopefully be able to replicate that for other kids.
You get a front row seat to things that you don't get to see any other way. We got to see kids who, would be surprised at their own success doing a thing that you don't even give second thought to. And it was just such a gift to be the first people to experience that in their lives.
When kids didn't know what a parent looked like, or maybe their experience of a parent was really different. School accountability, behavior in the household, doing chores, those are all really new things for a lot of the kids.
We needed help. When we started,
Help One Child actually kind of walked us through the whole adoption process because he was not a county placement, and so they kind of walked us through the process of guardianship and then adoption.
I go to parent support meetings for people who are struggling with the same things we were going through. And I describe to them the composition and the relationships we now enjoy with our kids. And, they look at me a little incredulously, like, I can't see that in our future. And I say, well, I couldn't see it in our future when we were in that same spot you were in. I think the advice I would give to somebody who's considering foster adoptive care is just find a community of support and other foster adoptive parents that you can just sort of share the journey with. And I think that was what Help One Child brought to us.
The one thing that I hope our kids will come away from our home with is what it means to be loved and cared for by somebody who also loves Jesus. Hopefully we were able to be a kind of a light in a really dark time for them just to know that we are here for them and that we don't stop being foster parents because they turn 18 or they move out of our home or we're here for the long haul, and they know that they can always drop in anytime and we'll be around for them.
Two things were just said that I want to pause and sort of take note of. The first, this is hard. God calls us into hard things. And I know personally, and I'll unpack this a little bit in a couple minutes, but so much growth can happen in hard things. And so I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. But the second thing I want to just make sure that you heard is the statement that, Jay and Pam, their door is always open. These foster teens that used to live with them maybe a decade ago or 5 years ago or maybe a couple months ago, they can still find stable, caring, healthy adults in their moment of need, or maybe on Thanksgiving. And as you reflect upon your own adolescence, who was there for you? Who showed up for you? Where did you know you could show up on their doorsteps and you'd be welcomed in a moment of need? I'm so thankful for people like Jay and Pam who said yes, continue to say yes, and are that source of strength and encouragement to so many kids. Last fiscal year, we were able to see over 4,000 child beneficiaries through our programs and events. In addition to that, we were able to see almost 1,400 adult beneficiaries. And while those are incredible numbers that just seem to grow and grow every year, none of it would be possible without church partners. And so let's take a minute and hear from one of our church partners. Westgate, who you'll hear from in a moment, has been a supporter of Help One Child for just about 25 years. We're so thankful for the encouragement that they provide our staff and the support that they provide and the opportunity to engage with the people attending there. Here's Kayvon.
Hi, my name is Kayvon Tirani, and I am the Global Compassion Pastor at Westgate Church here in San Jose. I first got to know Help One Child when I met Susan Herman, their former executive director, and really got to know the depths of what they were doing to help bring hope to the neglected and abandoned children in our community. Kids who, through no fault of their own, were in the foster care system. I got to know the heart of Help One Child and their drive to come alongside these children, to give them hope and love, and equally as important, a safe, wholesome environment to grow up and just to be a child, despite sometimes the incredibly difficult and painful circumstances they were growing up in. I got a chance to sit with the staff and hear their heart and their drive and their passions. We got a chance to ask them some deeper questions about what's motivating them and what they're dreaming about, and how we as a church and as individuals could come alongside of them in more meaningful ways. We truly feel that groups like Help One Child help us to be better as a church. We don't have the resources or know-how to take care of those in the foster care system the way that they can. We love the way that their goal is to help reunite families when situations are overcome and living parents are once again in a place where they can take care of their kids on their own. Or to help families after they've adopted a child, knowing that it's difficult sometimes for a child to adjust to a new family. Or even to help emancipate kids when kids are in extremely unhealthy and dangerous situations, to allow them to have this separation that will allow them to have a more successful life. We love the way that they nurture adoptive families and they don't abandon them once they've taken on this role. They work hard on creating a support structure for these families to be more successful in taking care of the children in their temporary or sometimes long-term care. Biblically, the word religion is used just a handful of times in the New Testament. More often than not, the word religion is put into a negative connotation, not a positive one. But Jesus made it clear in his parables what true religion and faith is. What we do see in James chapter 1 verse 27 is a beautiful definition of what religion truly is. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit the orphans and the widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. I love this definition, that true religion is when we take care of the least of these. True religion is when we come alongside the orphans and the widows and take care of them as Jesus would. Because of organizations like Help One Child, we're able to come alongside and stand with these children to give them hope and a future. How beautiful is that? We are sharing with them the love and the heart of Christ. I'm so encouraged by Valerie and Danielle and Judy and the incredible team that Help One Child has recruited to take care of the least of these among us. I pray and hope that you also see the value of what they're doing and want to come alongside of them prayerfully and financially, and even with your time and your expertise to love these children and families the way that Jesus loves them.
That's our goal. I hope you heard him say it, but Help One Child serves as a resource. We want to be able to be the experts in foster care because we know that the church and the church's staff, especially their pastors, don't have that bandwidth to do so. And so we love that we have the privilege of serving as a bridge and just want to see that continue. We want to always be able to speak into trends and most importantly, provide those opportunities for people to say yes. Well, at Help One Child, we have this saying. It goes like this. Greater understanding leads to greater compassion, resulting in greater action. And it's a joy to be witness to that all the time, personally, amongst the staff, but also with the volunteers and the families we serve. See, 10 years ago, a friend of mine invited me to volunteer at a group home serving foster teens. It's a little embarrassing to say that I had so many misconceptions and just these stigmas that existed. I was so ignorant and naive. In fact, I asked her some questions and kind of probably shared that I was a little nervous and anxious about what this might be. And she assured me that it would be a lovely night and that there would be food. And so I agreed. You know, in my mind, I thought I would be pulling up to kind of this big building, almost like a boarding school that was like on lockdown, serving hundreds of kids or housing hundreds of kids. And so it was to my great surprise that the address entered into Google Maps really delivered me in front of this adorable little cottage in downtown Mountain View. And from the exterior, this home looked like every other home on the street. When I knocked on the door and was let in by this very friendly staff member and kind of showed to the back where the kitchen was, I was introduced to a woman named Dana. Dana had been saying yes and volunteering with these foster youth, cooking with them a couple times a month for years. I remember her warmth and just tenderness and how she interacted with the youth. She possessed like true meekness, right? She was compassionate and strong, and I just saw the youth kind of flock to her all night, which is exactly what I wanted to do as well. And while we cooked with the youth that night, those stigmas and misconceptions that I had built in my head unknowingly, they were also shattered. right? I remember this one gal was so concerned. She was nursing this injury, and would it heal in time for the basketball season at high school to start? And then there was this other gal, and she was texting this boy, and like everything was being dissected. What he said, how fast he responded, what she said, and it just was silly. And I just remember that night thinking, oh my word, they're just teenagers. Like, they're just teenagers. But there were two conversations that I think kind of stung or sat with me. The first was this one girl kept talking about her dog, right? And I don't even remember how that conversation happened. It was 10 years ago. But I remember to this day her silliness around like what she would dress her dog up as, and just the best friend that he provided her. And I remember her always talking about him, and not in like an I miss him state, which is just curious to kind of look back on now, and it was then too. I mean, because clearly he didn't live in the group home. There was also another youth, and she was happily looking forward to a visit with her grandparents. That weekend, she was going to be able to see her siblings, and she was just excited and talking about what they might do. And I remember leaving that night with so many questions. Like, why can't she live with them? Do her siblings live there? It sure sounded like it. Like, I wanted to know more. And you know what? I wanted to do more. It was a couple years later in 2015 that my husband and I opened our home. We had become foster parents. We went through the training, and I remember just being sort of consumed by what we could provide. We had a room with a bed and a dresser and a fridge full of food, and we both had like stable jobs and families, and we'd be able to provide, extracurricular activities, sports, music, whatever, and just support these kids and be champions and cheerleaders for them. And I just remember being so excited to provide these things for the youth and children that would come in our homes. Our first yes was to a little guy who was 7. And I remember in the days and weeks and months that followed, I was no longer consumed by what I could provide. I was utterly consumed by what I would never provide. He needed healing. I remember the evidence of the anger and the pain that was so deep for him. And I just remember realizing that we would never be able to provide him the healing he needed, no matter what I could say, how I responded to his pain and his anger. I mean, I remember my sister even saying at one point, like, hey, Valerie, I know you want to love this little guy like Jesus does, but you are incapable of taking the cross. And were hard words, but true, and ones I'm grateful for, because I was reminded in that season who sits on the throne and who doesn't and shouldn't. Just like Pam and Jay's experience of entering into hard things, God calls us to them, and He grew me and stretched me to uncomfortable places, and I had to learn some really hard lessons like that one. There was this one, a little man that joined our family, though, several placements later. And he was like 2.5. And I remember sitting in on the social worker meeting where she unpacked the physical abuse that he had been victim to. And she told the stories of what he had been witness to, the abuse that his younger siblings had been victim to, and he had been witness to that. And I just remember being broken. And while we were there with the social worker, I definitely held it together, right? She didn't need to see the look of horror on my face. She didn't need to see my visible evidence of emotion. And I remember pulling out of that parking spot with my husband and just sobbing as I really sat with this story and the heaviness of it. And about halfway home, I looked at my husband and I said, you know what? I think if you hurt your child, Like if you cause them physical harm, man, I don't think you get a second chance. And he looked at me and grabbed my hand and said, that makes a lot of sense. But how do we reconcile that when we believe in a God of reconciliation and restoration? Oh, those were some hard words to hear. He was right, though. Once again, I had placed myself on the throne, and all of a sudden was putting myself in a position like I was the one determining who was worthy of a story of reconciliation and restoration. Well, this little man moved in a couple days later, and it was probably the following week that we were going to have a visit. And so we pulled into a very familiar parking lot and parked the car, and I was getting him out of his car seat and carrying him over to the building when he starts like wiggling out of my arms. He wants down. And I realized that from across the courtyard, probably 30 plus yards away, he is racing towards her. He spotted her. And he throws his arms out and is yelling, "Mama, Mama." And she sees him, and she kneels down and throws her arms open to embrace him. And I just am given this gift to witness this moment of love between these two. And this woman that I had been so quick to villainize, all of a sudden is so human. This woman that I was certain I had nothing in common with, now all of a sudden I have everything in common with. And first and foremost, being that we are both sinners, undeserving of stories of restoration and redemption. I sat and chatted with this woman, this mom, and she asked all the questions. How is he? How is he sleeping? What's he eating? And told me little stories about her little man who was completely nonverbal at that point. And her love for him and his love for her, they shaped me. Everything changed from then. You know, in our training to become foster parents, we had understood the importance of partnering with biological parents because it helped the child. But now we would move on to partnering with them because they too were made in the image of God. Because they were worthy of being amazing parents. And they were needing encouragement and support and deserving of finding that from us. I'm so thankful for the lessons that I learned while being a foster parent. They were hard, but they were needed. God used this hard call to shape me and grow me, and still is. It can be an incredibly hard call to love not just the kiddos, but families in vulnerable moments, right? Coming from hard stories and hard places, it can be really messy and it can be very dark. But if the church doesn't say yes, if we don't step into these hard spaces, who will? And like, where's the light? If we don't step into these dark places, where is the light? And so now I want to push this back to you. What is your yes? What is your calling? I hope that you have been encouraged hearing about the different programs Help One Child offers to strengthen families. And I hope that maybe you're starting to see where you fit, but I just want to ask, would you please consider becoming a financial supporter of Help One Child? We are great stewards of your money. 91 cents of every dollar donated goes directly to our programs. And beyond that, we really are only funded by individuals. We never accept any government funding. And we have donors ranging in their generosity, right? We have generous donors who give $20 a month and anything beyond that. And I just want to say, would you please consider? We set a goal of $200,000 with our 3 in-person events and this virtual event, and we are over halfway there, but we've got a long way to go. And so would you please consider supporting Help One Child? Share a link to this video, share a quick snippet with the people in your community, and invite them in as well. There's a place for us all to say yes. There's a place for us all to never give up. And I hope that you'll link arms with Help One Child to make sure families around the Bay Area saying yes and never giving up will be able to be supported by our programs and services. I'm thankful that you took the time tonight to watch this and be encouraged by it. I want to thank you in advance of your gift to Help One Child and your generosity in enabling us to say yes. Thank you so much.